Hello everybody and welcome back. It is Michael from Hallowed Thrills back with another video, and this one is a very long overdue video. So we are officially done with all of our vacation videos, all of our haunt season videos, and unfortunately it's now pretty much December, so I think it's finally time that we say let's do a long overdue haunt season wrap up. So I'm going to be talking about my HHN rankings for both Orlando and Hollywood, as well as my my awards for my favorite haunts that I went to this entire season. So let's start off, let's get these out of the way, what you guys are really here for. Let's talk about my HHN rankings for this year. But before we do that, please make sure that you are subscribed, have those bell notifications turned on. Make sure you're following me on both Instagram and Twitter. We are literally inches away from getting 1,000 subscribers. Never thought I'd get there, but we're so close. So tell your friends, tell anybody you know, get them to subscribe because we are almost there. But now, without further delay, let's get into the haunt season wrap up. So like I said, first thing we're going to be talking about is our Halloween Horror Nights rankings. And we're going to be starting out in Orlando for our house rankings. Our house rankings for Orlando, starting off at number 10 for me, was Spirits of the Coven. Now, the only reason that this ranked at number 10 for me is I didn't have any good run-throughs of this house. It was so high up on my hype list, I kind of overhyped it for me, and it did never, in my opinion, it did not live up to expectations at all. So I'm kind of why I was so bummed out about it, and which is why it ended up at number 10 for me. Now, number 9 is another house which I was never really high on to begin with, and still, for my opinions, didn't live up to any sort of hype at all that it was put forth for it. I mean, I just did not enjoy this house at all throughout the entire event, and that was Bugs Eaten Alive. Just wasn't scary, at least for me, and I have arachnophobia, and even that section didn't really do it for me. I know this is a super hot take, and I've gotten in so many arguments with people about this, but I just didn't think Bugs Eaten Alive was a scary house like people were saying it was going to be and all that. I mean, it was campy, it was fun, yeah, but that's not what we were led to believe heading into the event. Now moving on to number 8. Number 8 was a surprise for me, actually. This is Hellblock Horror. I actually had a couple good run-throughs of Hellblock Horror. I understood the story, even following the Unmasking the Horror tour I did. I understood the story way more and actually was able to enjoy the house a lot more. And I loved the whole, like, meta that they tried to go for with that house, and, like, the whole idea of it. I just enjoyed what they tried to do for that house. Now, we're going to move on to number 7, and that was Fiesta De Chupacabras. That house was so high up on my hype list. Now, I'm not going to say it was a bad house. It was actually, there's a decent gap between the Hellblock Horror and Fiesta De Chupacabras. I liked the house. It just was not nearly as good as any of the other houses that I have yet to mention. I mean, the costumes are great. The heritage and the background of the actual house and what went into it, making sure that it was a beautiful and, like, ethnically appropriate and accurate house, was so amazing. I love the attention to detail that they put into it, but it kind of fell flat as far as the scare value for me, and that's something I really value highly when it comes to Halloween Horror Nights houses. Now moving on to number 6. So number 6, I really wanted to put this one higher just because I did enjoy it thoroughly, but the lines for this one are what killed it for me, and that is The Weeknd After Hours Nightmare. I mean, I only got a couple run-throughs of it just because the lines were just way too long for it. It was not worth those lines whatsoever. It was more of a fun house type atmosphere. Now, I did know a few scare actors that were in the house, which did, like, help me enjoy it a little bit more, but overall, though, the house was kind of I mean, it wasn't really what I was expecting for that type of house, but we'll get into more of an in-depth idea about that when we talk about Hollywood. Now let's talk about number 5. Number 5 for me at Orlando was Universal Monsters Legends Collide. This was ranking at the very bottom of my list after opening weekend, and when I came back for my October trip, it shot up my list so fast. They did such a good job ramping up scares, changing things around. This to me was the most improved house of the event. It was so terrible at the beginning of the event, and it got so much better at the end. So much better that I was able to get it all the way up to number 5. Couldn't put any higher though, because number 4 was Blumhouse. Another huge upset and a huge shock for this year's event. I loved this year's Blumhouse house. The freaky section was amazing. The black bone section was probably one of the scariest house sections of the entire event this year. They absolutely killed it. Every single character in that house killed it, and to be honest, that might be my favorite Blumhouse out of the 3 that they have done. It was so well done and really captured the feelings of both movies. Now moving on to number 3, this was one that hype list wise was very low on my hype list because we didn't know much about it, but in the end I absolutely loved it, loved the idea, loved everything about it, and that was Descendents of Destruction. And I only have one more thing to add about it, and that is the bioluminescence area. That literally made that house for me. I loved all the scare actors in total throughout the house, but that bioluminescence area got me every single time. Scares from the left, scares to the right, scares that I wasn't expecting. I mean, there were even scares that I swear I had seen earlier in the event. They disappeared for a little bit and then came back later. It was just, I mean, every run through of that house was fantastic. And there were actually some pretty quotable lines in that house in general. My favorite being the cook, the guy on the grill. I absolutely loved his entire room there. It was hilarious every time I went in there. So we got 2 more houses. We're going to talk about number 2, and then I'm sure you could probably guess what number 1 after that is. And number 2 for me was Halloween. Now a lot of people may be like, "Whoa, hiss. Halloween wasn't that great," but for me, that was my first time seeing the 1978 classic at a Halloween Horror Nights house, and it was everything that I wanted. I saw the Myers house, I saw Michael Myers, I saw Laurie, I saw everything that I wanted to see. I saw the Judith Myers tombstone. I saw everything. It was so good. It literally looked like I was just walking through the movie. It was an amazing representation of that movie, and they did an amazing job. I absolutely loved going through that house, and I'm not gonna lie, my first time going through it, I may have teared up a little bit because of how amazing it looked and how, like, it just really captured my whole idea of that movie and that franchise. I loved that house. Which can only mean one more thing. Number 1 for me for this year was Dead Man's Pier Winter's Wake. I mean, is it a surprise? I am a sucker for water-based or sea-based houses, and this one knocked it out of the park. The ship, the main entrance with the pub and the statue and just everything about this house was scenically the most beautiful house I have ever seen at Halloween Horror Nights. The scares were kind of lackluster, but to me, personally, this is the greatest Halloween Horror Nights house I have ever been through. I loved every single walkthrough of it. These scare actors killed it every single time I went through it. And I actually had, I think, 3 nights I closed out this house. I loved that house. It was a work of art. And it literally, there were so many tiny little things that made me really just enjoy the house so much more. And I can't say much more about it. It is just the pinnacle of Halloween Horror Nights houses. But now let's move on to my Scare Zone rankings for Orlando. We're going to go through these a little bit quicker just because there's not much to talk about. So number 5 for me was Conjure the Dark. I mean, the costumes were cool, but I didn't really get the story of the zone. It didn't really click for me, even throughout the entire event. And also, It's a San Francisco zone, so it's a massive bottleneck. So anytime I really went through it, it was super crowded. Even on nights that it wasn't really that crowded anywhere else, it was still crowded in that zone. So that kind of hurt it, like it hurts every time, every zone that's in that area. Number 4, Horrors of Halloween. It's your front of the park zone. There wasn't really anything amazing about it. I mean, the Pumpkin Lord was there, and that was pretty much the only highlight of that zone. Nothing too amazing about it, but I did like the fact that they added the fire towers to behind the Pumpkin Lord as the event went on. I really did enjoy that addition for it. But other than that, nothing too spectacular with that zone. Moving on to number 3. Number 3 for me was Sweet Revenge. It was a cool zone, don't get me wrong, but it also was very crowded. I mean, I don't understand how that zone got so crowded and so packed all the time. It may have been because of the parade floats, but I don't know. I did enjoy all the characters. I did enjoy Mrs. Sweets and Major Sweets, and just the whole fact that that kind of tied into the tribute store. I loved that whole idea of it, and I loved just the fact that you were right in the middle of like a city's like town Halloween festival. I really did enjoy that, and just the whole concept of that zone was beautiful and executed perfectly. But moving on, number 2 for me was Graveyard Deadly Unrest. This was a shock to me. This zone really knocked it out of the park. All the characters were amazing. Now, there were some that were a little bit on the cheesier side, but I really enjoyed the zone. Every time that I walked through it, I mean, it was a little out of the way for me to walk through it, but every time I walked through it, I did enjoy my time in there. And the brothers in the middle, the 2 skeleton brothers, were just so amazing and killing it every single night of the event that I was there. And the twins, oh my gosh, they were great. I loved that zone, but not as much as I loved number 1. Scarecrow Cursed Soil. Loved this zone, loved the Corn Man. Loved my favorite being the actual crow guy. Oh my gosh, he was my absolute favorite. The stilt walkers were amazing. I loved the little like alcoves that they had, and like the little barns that they had where the characters could like pull apart the wood and like scare you through them. It was really well done. I absolutely loved what they did for that zone, and to the scale that they did for that zone. It was perfect. Literally perfect. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. It was such an amazing zone this year, and my number 1 zone for Orlando. Now let's move on to HHN Hollywood, my rankings for that. Now this was my first time out in Hollywood, so I'm going to be doing my first official ranking for Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood. Now we're doing a top 9 because we're actually going to be including the Terror Tram in our list of houses. So starting off with number 9 was Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Come on, guys. That house was god-awful. There was nothing good about that house. The characters were trying their best, but there was too much black walls, too much empty space, just not enough detail. It really kind of just jumped all over the place in the movie, and it just did not work. I don't know what you guys were thinking when making that house or redoing it, but it just didn't work like I was expecting it to work. And Orlando's is 1,000 times better. Moving on. Number 8, Halloween. Y'all did not knock it nearly as much out of the park as Orlando did. Yours just kind of fell flat, didn't really measure up. There were different sections that I absolutely adored more than Orlando's, but overall, in general, it just kind of, once again, jumped all over the place in the movie, didn't really flow with the actual timeline of the movie, and was just kind of, just like I said, all over the place. That's why it's at number 8 for me. Number 7, Blumhouse. Once again, another thing that Orlando did better than you. Your Blumhouse was mostly freaky and very little black foam. Now, don't get me wrong, your freaky section, so much better than Orlando's. Absolutely loved the different areas that you had, that like the whole like area where you looked like there was lockers and then they disappeared and you could see the football field and the Blissfield Butcher and all. It looked so cool, and those different effects were amazing. So much better than Orlando's, but your black phone section was a little less to be desired. Wasn't great, so it kind of brought down the whole rest of the house. Now moving on, number 6, Terror Tram. I wasn't expecting much out of the Terror Tram, and I was pleasantly surprised on how much I enjoyed it, because it was 90% Kudos the Clowns / Hollywood Harry, and a 10% us and Nope, which is why I enjoyed it so much, because I was really kind of like, it's us, I've already seen that, been there, done that. But the fact that that wasn't most of it, and the fact that it was really more of that original side of it and all talking about Hollywood Harry is why I enjoyed it so much. And Hollywood Harry is an icon. He's amazing. Moving on, number 5, we have the Hollywood Horror Hotel. I loved this house. It was an amazing story. The triple scares all over the place were amazing. The story was so good and just so well put together, and honestly, comparing, because this is all their replacement house for what Evil Dead was for us and what ended up being Hellblock Horror for us, they did so much better with their replacement house than Orlando did. I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, it seemed like the Hollywood Horror Hotel was always what that was supposed to be, and it was a home run for them. It honestly was. Like, Hollywood did an amazing job with their originals this year. Moving on, number 4. Now we're going to talk about this one a little bit more. The Weeknd After Hours Nightmare. I adored Hollywood's version of this house. So much better than Orlando's. It was more of the horror aspect rather than the poppy funhouse type aspect that Orlando ended up going for. This was more of a twisted version of the songs, very demented and decrepit and kind of very gory and bloody. Everything that I was expecting to see in Orlando ended up being over in Hollywood, and that is why I had loved this house so much. They did such a good job remixing the songs to make it not feel like, oh, I'm walking through a little party fun house. They actually made it seem like, oh, there's something wrong here. Like, I am getting an uneasy feeling going through this house. And just the amount of, like I said, the gore that they put in this house was super surprising to me, which is why it ends up at number 4. Now, number 3, kind of a bit of a surprise. I expected this to be a little bit higher, but I love the other 2 more, and that is going to be at number 3, Scarecrow the Reaping. Now, don't get me wrong. This house was fantastic. It was everything that I was expecting and more. I mean, they killed it with triple scares, quadruple scares. Like, I'd be going boom, right, left, like just getting scared back to back, just over and over again. They did amazing with timing in that house, and the characters were great, and the costuming was great, and just what they could do with that house in a tent, and not even a permanent tent, a pop-up tent, was just so well done and so amazing, and I applaud them for what they were able to do with that. But number 2, Universal Monsters Legends Collide. Anyone who knows me, who heard me talk about my experience in Hollywood when I came back, heard me say time and time again, Universal Monsters in Hollywood absolutely kicked Orlando's ass. They did such a good job. I loved the way that they went with it, how it was more of a English museum type style, where they had brought all these artifacts over from Egypt and they were trying to move them into this museum, or from the Alucard Trading Company, and how the mummy and all of his minions tried to come in and steal back the amulet of Amun-Ra. It just, you could understand what was going on and how they were all battling each other trying to get this amulet. And unpopular opinion, the Anubis Stiltwalker, the furry Anubis Stiltwalker with the glowing blue eyes, was amazing. So scary. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh my god, that is one of the coolest costumes I have ever seen going through a Horror Nights house. It blew my socks off, and I went through that house more times than anything else in Hollywood. I adored that house. which was surprising that it only ended up at number 2 for me, because number 1 was the only house that I think I did more than Universal Monsters Legends Collide, and that is La Llorona, Weeping Woman. That house was amazing. It was the first house I ever went through in Hollywood, and it was the last house that I went through before I left for the year. It was amazing. I think I went through that house like 5 times in the 2 days I was there. They killed it, and that is everything that I wanted from that house. It was scary, it was gory, it was just everything that I just could have imagined that they would have done with it. And they just knocked it out of the park. That house was just scenically amazing. It was dark, it was creepy, it was just, I can't, like, there's so many adjectives I could put for this house, and none of them would even compare to what it actually was, what felt like going through it. Like I said, Hollywood did fantastic on their originals this year. Hands down, I applaud you guys on a great job this year. Now let's move on to their scare zones, which did leave a lot to be desired. Hollywood, your scare zones blow. Y'all need to fix that. I'm just gonna fly through them. Number 3, clown saws. Kind of ended up running into number 2, which was Sideshow Slaughterhouse. They kind of ended up merging together. There never really was a definitive split between the two, because the clowns ended up going into Sideshow Slaughterhouse and vice versa. It just didn't really make sense to me. So they both kind of just were like, bleh. And number 1 was so much better than those two, which was El Pueblo del Terror. So much better than the other two. I had amazing interactions with all of the different urban legends that were in there, and just, they were all amazing, and the costumes were great, and the actual set design in there was pretty cool as well. I actually thought it was a nice different take that I wasn't really expecting, and frankly, they knocked that one out of the park, and I don't understand what happened with the other two, because that zone was great. But that does wrap up our Halloween Horror Nights rankings and everything. So now let's talk about our Haunt Awards. Now, there are a couple awards that I want to talk about. We're going to start off with the least kind of important one, and that is the haunt that I am most excited for next year. Now, it is no surprise probably what this one is, and that is because it's its 50th anniversary next year. That's going to be Knott Scary Farm. I absolutely had an amazing time this year for the 49th year of the event. I loved every single one of their houses out there. My personal favorite being the Depths. Once again, sucker for underwater houses. Sue me. But even the some of the weaker houses were still amazing, like Dark Entities and Pumpkin Eater. Well, I don't know about Pumpkin Eater. Pumpkin Eater was kind of trash. Kind of glad it's gone. But there were some ones that I was very sad that it was their last year. Dark Ride, super sad that it's its last year. But every single one of their houses was really well done, and I love the whole story of Ghost Town and the Calico Mines and the Green Witch and Sarah Marshall. Just everything about that event is amazing, which is why I'm super excited to possibly go back next year for their 50th anniversary to really see how that story develops and how much they go all out for their 50th anniversary, because that's a tough thing to do for a haunt event. 50 years, man, that's insane. If you guys have an opportunity to go out there this coming year, I 100% recommend going out there. But now let's talk about my biggest surprise haunt of this year, and that was Valley of Fear. That haunt was, I had very low expectations going into it and really knocked it out of the park. One of the most fun haunts that I went to this year. It was super fun. The actors were high energy. The whole hayride was super fun. It was low budget, but at the same time it felt really just personal and fun. I don't know what else to say about that haunt other than it was fun. It really was. Let's talk about the scariest haunt of this year though, and that was Brighton Asylum. I just, through the entire time of going through that, had just an uneasy feeling and was on edge the entire time, that pretty much any time that anyone jumped out at me, I immediately jumped back and was like startled. It was just that just constant uneasy feeling going through there, which is why I was just not able to focus on, okay, is there someone coming over there? Is there someone coming there? Like, I just was completely thrown off my game with just how the feeling I had walking through that attraction, which is why to me it was the scariest attraction that I went through this year, scariest haunt I went through this year, and hands down, I am excited to possibly go back there for maybe their off-season stuff this year. Which leads us to our last award to give out, the one you've all been waiting for, our favorite local haunt that I went to this year. Now, some may be thinking, okay, is it Sir Henry's? Did Sir Henry's finally do it? I loved Sir Henry's. They did a great job, but not this year. Now, Brighton, I had a great time there. It was super scary. Could this possibly be the year that they dethrone our reigning champion? I don't think so. Our reigning champion, third year in a row though, Reaper's Revenge, is once again our favorite haunt from this season. Congratulations you guys, you absolutely kill it every year. It is one of the most unique places I've ever been to, and is 100% a destination haunt if you can make it out there. 100% love that attraction. But that is it. That is our wrap up of the entire haunt season. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and staying with me throughout the entire haunt season. We have a ton of Christmas themed stuff coming up. I know, like I said, this is the really late haunt season wrap up, but Christmas stuff is on its way. We have our first Christmas event we're coming to this weekend that will be posted next week. You guys don't want to miss that. It is Longwood Gardens for the Longwood Christmas. It's gonna be my first time going there, so you guys don't want to miss that. We have Field of Scream stuff that we're doing. We have Tinseltown, we're gonna go there again. And of course, we're gonna go to Hershey Park because they always bring more stuff than ever before each and every year for Christmas Candy Lane. So those are all of our Christmas stuff that we have going on. But if you guys did enjoy this haunt wrap up, please make sure you drop a like and also comment down below, out of all of the haunt season videos that I did this year, what was your favorite? I would really like to get your feedback on that to figure out what I should do next year. But as always, I've been Michael from Hellblock Horror, giving you the all clear, and all clear means you're out of here. See you guys next time.